In this video, we're gonna take this 2010 Audi with a worn out automatic transmission and manual swap it. You probably have a lot of questions like, what parts do we need? How long does it take? How much does it cost? How do we code the car? And why even bother? Not only are we gonna do this swap, we're gonna answer all those questions as well. Whoa. Our swap is going to start at Lifetime Audi Parts. This is a local Audi scrapyard where we're going to get the transmission and a few other things that I know we're going to need for the swap. It's out and on the bench. So what's going to happen next is Brandon's going to break all this stuff down, separate the engine from the transmission. While he does that, I'm going to jump over here to the car, pull the clutch line. I think we got everything gettable. So now we get to go have some fun and see if we can actually make the car think it has a manual. Now I already did the full vehicle scan to be sure that we capture any coding and adaptations that are currently in the car. This is the clutch pedal switch and it's the most in-depth electrical piece of this job. And I went through the wiring diagram and flagged what connections are and where they go. We'll need to make the rest of the harness for this and also for the reverse position switch. A lot of this hardware that I'm going to be taking out is technically one-time use. I'm going to roll the dice a little bit and reuse a bunch of it because this hardware is actually really expensive. I'm pretty confident I'm not done spending money yet, so we'll tally that up at the end. So there's a lot that needs to happen for this swap. I'm gonna start under the hood, get rid of this cowl, and this front piece right here. I already disconnected the battery, so we don't have to worry about that. Gosh, that frees up so much room. A lot of leaf debris in here, Chuck. We're also going to be dealing with the brake booster on this side as well. Now we gotta get this belly pans off. There's actually a third piece that goes right there that I don't have installed. I left it off after the PCV valve failed. 700 different hardwares. Now with the wheels off and the car up in the air, let's go ahead and take the exhaust off. Luckily for me, this has all been off pretty recently, so hopefully we don't run into any broken bolt sadness. By the way, if you don't have one of these exhaust hanger remover thingies, you need to get one, because they're fantastic. This is where having a friend would come in handy. Free and loose. That's not even on there, Chuck. Well, that did something. This is a fumble mechanic here. I guess that worked. Can I do this a less stupid way? Yay! Hardest part of the whole job, just kidding. With the exhaust off, I figured I'd go ahead and lower the car down and get the top side transmission bolt. Got our cardboard here to keep our bolts organized. This is where we get to sit up here and try and reach these bolts. I should have got my electric ratchet, but I didn't. If you've never seen this cardboard trick, draw the bell housing out. Yeah, that should have went in smoother. You can put your bolts in like that, keep them organized. You know, some people don't need to do. I always like to take every opportunity I can to stay as organized as I can. All right, we might have to come back. We might have to come back under here. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Woo. Next, we're gonna take the axles out, and there's a shield that sits right on top of the axle that's kind of a pain in the butt. Probably the worst part of the whole job when Paul and I did the clutch packs. Now, according to the parts catalog, the axles are actually the same on automatic and on manual. So I did not get new front axles. Hopefully that pays off. Now, I'm only unbolting the axles. I'm gonna leave them in the car rather than just completely taking them all the way out. We'll have plenty of room to work around it. Next up, we're gonna get this brace off. There's a 10mm nut that holds the power steering line on over on the driver's side. Ta-da! I also loosened these shields. Well, here's our axle shield. Get our prop shaft unbolted from the transmission. There we go. Loose shaft. We'll unbolt the backside too. Now we gotta unbolt our carrier bearing, which is behind this shield right here, which should come off like this. All the dirt. You can see our carrier bearing. This is it right here. This is another good thing to consider upgrading while you're here. Go ahead and put these right back in so we don't lose them. Now it is a good time to go ahead and drain some fluid. Probably went through $500 worth of fluid in this car over the number of repairs that have happened to it. I'm a little sad. We've spent so much time with this DSG, nursing it back to health, or, well, nursing it, not really. It was never really healthy, I don't guess. Something I haven't really considered until just right now is what I'm gonna do with the cooler lines. Gushy, gushy goo. We're gonna let this drain considerably. I don't wanna make a, well, I say I don't wanna make a mess. I wanna make as little mess as possible. That's probably about all I'm gonna get, or at least all I have the patience for. We could spend a month here waiting for fluid to drain out. Put the fill plug in and the drain plug. Next, I'm gonna undo the starter. Now, one of the bolts I took out up top goes from the trans to the engine side. That's a starter bolt. And then there's another 16 millimeter at the front on the passenger side near the oil pan. Next, I'm gonna take this bracket off, and that's gonna give us some access to things like where the cooler lines are mounted up, because we need to get those off. Probably would be a good idea to replace this mount that I jankily filled with windshield sealant, I guess. What is the right word? We get our cooler, this stuff. Still have a couple of more transmission bolts holding on to the engine. I'm gonna wait till the very end. Like, I'm gonna get them all out but one. And we'll get the last one out once we have the trans jack underneath here. I got the stupidest tool on the planet to do this with too, by the way. Oh no. Active drippage. I don't know why I didn't do this earlier. These little orange foamy earplug things, you just shove them in there. Just make sure you take them back out. That way you don't leak all over. Here I have been getting dripped on like a dum-dum. And that's one of my hacks. I love this hack. And I didn't even think about it. Okay, on to the next thing. Now I'm gonna take off this steering shaft. I'm gonna go ahead and undo the lines here. Ooh, juicy. And the shaft. These are usually indexed, so you don't have to worry about them like going in the wrong way or anything. Like everything, put our bolt back in. We got two bolts on the driver's side that we need to get out. There's this one, and then just below, you can kind of see it here, is the other one. We are on the home stretch here, my friends. We got some bolts we gotta take out from back behind here from the flywheel. Super hard to see, definitely an inconvenience. Those are the guys we gotta get out, and we have to rotate the engine around in order to access all of them. Should probably take that bolt out right there. I think I'd give myself some more room. Is it the same size and everything? Sure is. Oh, look at all that space I have now to loosen this tiny little bolt. Look at how small this bolt is. You're gonna love this. Here we go. Look at how short that is. Little booper guy, counter holding the crankshaft with the special crankshaft holding tool. So for context, this is similar to like unbolting the torque converter on an automatic transmission. It's not exactly that, but that's kind of how to think about it. And this, my friends, is the final one. Boop, it's time. We hit our stage 2. Now we can go super fast. I feel like I'm gonna need some wood. I am also going to strap down this transmission. It's a big boy. Get rid of this pole jack here at the back. This is where the moment of truth comes in. We got two more bolts. We got this little connectortron here too. And then we'll find the one bolt that I thought I got that I forgot. That's usually what happens. What I can tell you is this is the longest bolt on the planet. It's the longest bolt ever made in the history of bolts. Holy okay. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. There's nothing like a big transmission slipping on the jack to get your heart pumping. I'm feeling pretty lucky that it didn't actually fall. There we go. That felt good. I think I can actually come down. That's just begging to get ripped out. Victory! We did it! Now we got to get this big old Bertha transmission onto this table so we can get it out of here. And then, yeah, then we're going to deal with the other one. It's you. Oh, geez, the handle slipped right off. Now we can get that even closer. Let's get a wood. There we go. There we go. Nothing but the finest Harbor Freight quality here. Let's get some of this DSG stuff out of the way. Our cooler lines run up front, and luckily, right at the oil pan and alternator, there's a junction. So I'm gonna take the lines out, but I'm gonna leave the rest of it in forward of this junction. That way, God forbid, anything happens, we can always go back if we have to. I'm not planning for that, but there's no sense in destroying this stuff if we don't have to. If we can save it for another time, then we should. I'm waiting for just the splurge of fluid here. Glurb, glurb, glurb. We'll plug these up with something. Not quite sure what yet. Now we can get these lines completely out of here, which should be pretty easy, hopefully. I juiced everywhere. There's one. Oh my gosh, come out of there. There we go. This one should come out pretty easy. Maybe, there we go. Oh yeah. Now for this dangly harness, I'm just gonna yeet it up on the top and we're gonna leave it in the car. We're at a good spot where I think it makes sense to move inside and get rid of that guy right here. I'm a little mad at myself because I didn't move the seat all the way back before I disconnected the battery, so there's that. This is pretty much destroyed already. You can see this is just coming apart, so we're just gonna reach in and unplug everything. Don't need that anymore. We also need to take our AC trim up here off as well. We'll get that unplugged. That just came right off. I don't know if you could see how much dirt is back on the inside of this, but it's a lot. Some of that was already there. Most of it is because I drive this car off-road. There we go. There we go. We got a bunch of connectors underneath here. There we go. There we go. That's gonna make my life a lot easier. So here's all our connections. I have a new one of these that we're gonna be installing, which is nice because my start-stop button peeling a little bit. Now my goal is to remove as little of this as possible, but I have a feeling I'm gonna have to remove more of it than I want to. Get this tray out of the way. Oh, I found some change, 35 cents. All right, well, that's one way to recoup some of your expenses. We're gonna be shifting like madmen before you know it. Now we gotta unbolt the whole assembly. Guess I should probably unplug it as well. Some of these plugs that I just unplugged are the things that we're going to have to sort through with our manual. And right down to the floor. Holy moly! Okay, auto out. Time for the manual to go in. I don't know where the hole is at. Somewhere around here. Hopefully I can reach it through. Reach through, get at it. It would be easier if I had a friend. I got the boot caught. That's what my problem was. There we go. Now I can start one. If only this swap was just that easy. Swap the shifter and bam, you're done. So for the rest of this for now, I'm just gonna leave this. I decided to take the seat out because we have all that stuff unplugged. It's a constant buzz. Beep. I should have done this before. I for sure could have done this without taking the seat out, but I think it's gonna just be overall easier. Oh, I found another quarter. This next part is probably gonna be my least favorite part of this whole job, and that's dealing with adding our clutch pedal. I took the whole pedal cluster from Lifetime Audi, so we're gonna replace all of them, but working underneath the dash is usually not very fun, and I'm probably gonna have to take off more than I actually want to. Also, in order to prevent the steering wheel from moving, I taped it. We don't want our clock spring to get all twisted around. There we go. All right, well, that does free up quite a bit of room. At least there's already a hole. You can kind of see it way back here. So, plus note, we don't have to cut the car apart. This is our new pedal cluster, or whatever you want to call it. We have our clutch. We also have a new brake pedal that we need to install. This one is like twice as big as the manual brake pedal. So I have two choices. I can disassemble this and try and install these pieces on that bracket that should, hopefully anyway, be the same bracket. It looks the same anyway. Or we can take this whole bracket out and install this one. We got some more disassembly to do, so let's just go ahead and do that now. We'll make the decision in a minute. Well, after a little bit more investigation, I think it's probably just gonna be easier to go ahead and take the whole steering column out, swap the whole bracket over, rather than doinking around with the pedal cluster and the pins and everything. We'll see if I live to regret that choice or not. Okay, well. Why don't you want to come unplugged? Some of this might be a bit overkill, but if I can free up a little bit of extra room, it's usually worth it. What's a couple more screws between friends? This is gonna be awkward. Oh yeah. I got a bunch of stuff taken care of under the dash, but we have to deal with the front side of all that stuff as well. This is our brake fluid reservoir, which we do have a new one of these that has the clutch line on it. The cylinder attached to the clutch pedal is actually underneath this box right here, so we need to get this guy out of here. I seem to remember dealing with this part as kind of a pain in the butt on the wrecked car, but we got some modulators, we got some fuse panel, but it works out good because this is the ECM, and so we have to repin or add a couple pins to the ECM anyway. There's one, there's two. It's held in with like plastic tabs. We'll get our computer out of the way. Now I can actually see right into the car. How fun is that? Minimal fun is how much fun that is. These two harnesses you can see right here aren't too bad. It's this one down below that I think is gonna provide us a challenge. I'm gonna unplug these two connectors here. And that power wire down there. Can I reach it? Yes, I can. Yay. I think I can undo this whole fuse panel here. Pop. Oh yeah. There we go. So that harness was actually just part of this whole big relay panel. I'm gonna get that whole guy out of the way too now. Now our clutch pedal and cylinder lives sort of right here, kind of this way of this opening and down just a little bit. So let's get this box out of the way. I vaguely remember having to tape the wiper motor off. That's better. You got to be careful with this stuff too. If we break it, like break it, we run the risk of letting water in the car. VWs and Audis have enough problems with water leaks. We don't need to create any extra ones. I think I'm gonna go ahead and take the cowl and the wiper arms and just move them out of the way. That should make getting this box out a little easier, and I'll free up a bit of room down here. Also, we're this far. What's a couple more bolts? I should have probably pulled the arms off too, but I didn't. Like a dum-dum. We can get this whole disaster out of the way. In this bundle of connectors, there's one wire that actually runs to the complete other side of under the hood, and that's what's kind of holding me up. So I went ahead and unclipped it, and I don't think I'm gonna be able to like pull it all the way through, but I think that should give me enough room to at least just get this up and kind of out of the way. Ugh, ugh, look at that. Gross. Here's the wire. You can see it buried. Let me see if I can unclip that one too. It's not gonna get this box out of the car, but if it gets it out of the way enough, then we can work around it. Annoying that it's gonna be there, but that's plenty of space. This is how much nasty crap builds up underneath. There should be a drain under here somewhere. You know what? Let's vacuum that out real quick. It should never be a wonder why VWs and Audis have so many water leaks. It's because of stuff like this. All these leaves and stuff get trapped and then block drains, water builds up, and it can actually leak like right through here or through this box. So now with all that out of the way, we can actually see this is where our clutch pedal is gonna poke through right here in this hole. So we don't have to drill a hole or nothing. There's just like a piece of foam with a seal covering that up. Next, we're gonna move under the dash and work with the pedal cluster. And for that, we're gonna need this special tool. The way this tool works is you have to come back here and hook in the brake pedal and then pull it to release the clip. Even with the tool, this can kind of be a pain in the butt. Nothing like a little bit of struggling to get that out. Hey! Probably not a bad idea when you do this job to go ahead and replace those clips. Now we just got a couple more bolts to get out in order to get this whole bracket out the way. Oh, we gotta unplug the gas pedal too. Now there's two more bolts that, frankly, I kind of forgot that I needed to take out, and they are the bolts that hold the master cylinder and the brake booster through the firewall and bolt to the pedal cluster. I can just unbolt the bolts and we can take the pedal cluster out. And with any luck, our pedal cluster's loose. Hey, there we go. All right, here's our two assemblies side by side. The brackets, they're the same. It has the opening for the cylinder and everything to go through. So you think, hey, maybe I can just install the clutch pedal. Well, the brake pedals are different sizes. We have the small brake pedal on the manual and the big chunky boy on the automatic. So you would also have to swap out brake pedals. They're pinned in up at the top here and here. The problem you're gonna run into is in order to get these pins in, you're not gonna have to worry about getting them out, right? If you're installing on this one. In order to get these pins in, you have to pull this pin way over here. There's a bunch of modules and relays and stuff that live over on this side. For the brake pedal side, There is, I think, part of the HVAC motor system is like right here. So you probably wouldn't have enough space to get this pin out either. While taking this out is not the ideal fun day, probably easier just to go ahead and swap the whole thing if you can grab the whole thing from another car. The other piece I'm gonna need to swap over is this plastic clip right here. So this is where the rod for the brake booster goes through, and at the end of the rod is a ball that clips into this white clip right here. That tool presses these two tabs outward in order to make room to pull the pedal backwards, the opposite way you would push it if you were slowing down or stopping the car, and get around those two clips. Let's go ahead and get this plastic clip out of here. We'll just undo the tabs. This is that dumb old clip. Then we can just snap the new one in, or I guess it's not a new one, but I say we can snap it right in. There we go. That was the easiest part of that whole thing. Okay, we gotta make sure our booster is in the right hole. And we'll try and land it on the 10 mil studs. Oh, don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it. I didn't drop it. So that's pretty much how it's gonna sit. Nice. Now before things get too wild and crazy, I need to put this grommet in. Okay, cluster's in. Let's get our booster tightened back up. I'm gonna wait on the fluid reservoir till pretty much the end. That way we don't end up having a big old mess of brake fluid while we're working on the rest of it. Now that the pedals are all bolted up, I think it's gonna be time to put the steering column back in. Now, I'm only going to bolt up the column itself. I'm not gonna do all the rest of the stuff that goes along with it. The main reason is we still got wires we gotta run through up in, like through this area. So I don't wanna put all this stuff back together just quite yet.
Can't understand why my back hurts all the time.
Look at that. Starting to look like a manual. Now comes the part where I'm pretty sure if you were in up until this point, you're out. And that's doing the wiring. We have two things we need to wire up. One is the clutch switch. I had dug through a wiring diagram and flagged what these wires were. I'll have to find out I had the wrong wiring diagram. We also have the switch to indicate reverse. 3 wires, this one's going to be pretty easy. This one goes to J519, which is like the body control module that controls lighting. If you don't care about reverse lights, you don't need this one. This can yeet right into the garbage. The clutch we do need to wire up because we need to make sure that we can start the car. 1 wire is ground of the 6 wires. 2 of them are power, which I think are these 2, and 2 go to the ECM, and 1 goes to the electronic parking brake module, which I'm pretty sure is this purple wire right here. This is the only one that's gonna kind of be a pain in the butt, because this goes all the way back to right in front of the passenger side taillight. I made the reverse harness on the bench. I knew the 3 wires would need a pretty significant amount of length, 1 being a ground wire that will ground under the hood, the other 2 needing to go into the cabin of the car to the J519. I did put that harness in a heat sleeve because they're going to be pretty close to the exhaust. Initially, I didn't put pins in either one of the harnesses because I don't know what pins each module uses. There are tons of different pins that each module can use, so I generally like to pull the pin out of the module and compare it that way. Luckily, I got a ton of pins left over from other jobs. Now that we have some basics of our harness made, let's get this stuff in. So this is our clutch switch. Right? That's just a magnetic switch. We don't need to add a whole lot of wires to this, right? For example, this ground, I'm gonna ground right here, right on this stud right here. Now, I need more wire, but how much do I need? Like 2 inches, 5 inches? I don't exactly know. I think the thing that makes the most sense to do next is to go ahead and get that E-box back installed so that we can start measuring out our harness. But if I do that, I'm gonna cover up this cylinder here. So I'm gonna put the hose on. That's gonna go to the reservoir. I'm thinking I might just cut this one rather than swapping that whole thing over and just plopping the line on. I also believe it is time for our new clutch line. I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate what I'm about to show you, despite the fact that it's completely blown out on the camera. They labeled which side goes where. Thanks, USP Motorsports. I appreciate that. There might have sounded like there was some sarcasm in that statement, but honestly, there's not. I really do appreciate that. Now, this may not... Oh, goodness gracious. Let's try that again. Now, this may not be the final install of this box here. Don't break it. Don't break it, Charles. Now, we have a little bit better idea of what we're gonna need to do here. We are gonna need to add a few inches to this for this ground. this whole conglomeration kind of goes in here too like that. So I think if I add 6 inches to each one of these wires, that should be enough. This is our 94 pin connector and the one that I need to splice into for the ECM. I have 2 wires that are gonna go to it. I'm gonna depin 1 pin out of this ECM and see if I can match it up to what I already have. And we're dealing with 0.5 millimeter and 0.35 millimeter wires, so they're pretty small. There's a little lock on this top piece. We can slide that off. This is our secondary lock. The primary lock is what actually clips the wire into the location. So we need to take that out. Depending on what wire number you have will dictate what connector it goes in. There are 2 pins that I need to add to the ECM. Both of them are in the 94 pin connector and we need to find number 11 and number 15. It looks like number 11 already has a pin in it, so we're gonna depin that pin, add our pin to our clutch switch, then all we have to do is drop a pin into number 15. Important to note, if you're doing this, there's a bunch of different ECM options and wiring options, so you always wanna make sure that you are working with the correct wiring diagram for your car. Now with the wire for pin 11 out, I was able to somehow miraculously find another one of the same pin size. I think the wire diameter is a little bit bigger, but this is probably 0.35 millimeters and this is 0.5 millimeter, so that's totally fine. I'm not going to cut this wire. What I'm actually gonna do is I'm just going to cap it off bloop, with some heat shrink and leave it, just tuck it back in the harness. So I got the 2 wires in, numbers 15 and 11. We got this guy ready to get sorted. I'm gonna put my secondary locks back in. The wire that was in position 11 actually went to the transmission and to the convenience module. I'm not gonna get too crazy with this just yet. Just wanna kind of hold it together. We need to test all this stuff before putting any of it like all back together. Let's get some of these wires ran. Harness for a reverse switch needs to go through this grommet and this grommet. This grommet is for the firewall, and then this one is for the e-box. So that'll make it a little easier. When you're running wires, especially through rubber grommets, a little bit of soapy water will help those wires. This is just a pick that I cut, or not cut, but hammered down so that it had a flat end. Ooh, nice and good. Man, I'll tell you, fishing wires when it goes well, kind of enjoyable. I don't have a problem grabbing the ends of these with pliers because we're gonna put connectors on it anyway. By the way, if you're not using a seam ripper for cutting electrical tape on wiring harnesses, y'all are missing out. It is the way. I'm going to thread these wires through this grommet exactly the same way as I did the other one. This flattened down pick to open up the grommet and some soapy water to help the wires slide a little bit easier. Now our 519 module is just on the inside of here, so this should be a good amount. With the reverse light harness ran, now it's time to do the clutch switch harness. I'm gonna reach down and try and unplug it so we can pull the whole connector out. I think that's gonna make doing the rest of this harness quite a bit easier. Here's the harness. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fish it through and then I'm gonna add some length and then we'll draw it back out if we need to. Now, kind of on a whim, I threw a piece of heat shrink on the end of our wires that are going through the grommet, which is a good thing I did because I almost ran that ground through there too. This should hopefully get us fished a little bit fishier. There we go. I'm not gonna lock her in. I'm just gonna set it kind of in there. So we got this ground ready to go. This ground, we're gonna have to add a length of wire, which is no big deal. We'll put an eyelet on this one. When it comes to making harnesses, adding lengths to wires, I prefer the crimp connectors with the heat shrink built into them. This is the way the repairs are done at the dealership. This is a factory authorized repair. Needless to say, I'm sure I've made thousands of wiring repairs this way. It's a highly debated topic on whether this is better over solder. Frankly, if you do either one of them right, it's probably going to be just fine for you. So whichever method you like to do that, just do a good job, and it should be fine. Our clutch switch requires 2 different power sources. It looks like one switched from the ECM power supply relay, and another one either ignition power or straight battery power. I'm gonna add one fuse into the fuse panel under the dash, and another one inside the e-box. While putting this one inside the e-box is not my favorite idea, it's probably going to be the easiest way to do it. I'm gonna tap in to this big red wire that goes to the red connector and draw power off of it. To do that, I'm gonna use this inline fuse holder and drop a 5 amp fuse in it. Now that we got her soldered, I'm gonna slide a piece of heat shrink over. This is like marine heat shrink, So there's actually a sealant inside of it. This is all pretty watertight anyway, so it's not a huge deal, but might as well try and do it as best as we can. So now we'll have this little fuse panel thing up underneath. This is a 5 amp fuse. Hopefully we never have to check it. What I am gonna do now is set this kind of in here because we're gonna need these plugged in, get our ECM plugged in. Similar to what we had to do with the ECM, I gotta do that to the electrics module, which you can kind of see it back up here. There are actually a bunch of connectors at the electrics module. We're only dealing with one, this A7. So I added one wire to pin 21 in this white connector. I need to add one to pin 13. Luckily too, I had the pins. I also have this jumble of wires that exist down here. This is all like headliner type stuff, sunroof and whatnot. So this probably could all just get cut. Now you might be thinking, Charles, this seems like the worst part of this entire job. And well, you know, I don't know. I enjoy this part. It's find it relaxing. Something about running wires calms me down. Something about figuring out how this comes apart calms me down. I also need to supply another power source to our clutch switch. If this were a factory manual car, that power would come from this fuse panel. And what's cool about this fuse panel is there's a bus bar. So one side of all these fuses has a single power source, then the wire on the other side would go to the component. So rather than cutting and splicing into existing wires, the car has provided the power source. I'm gonna drop a pin and a fuse in this factory fuse panel. What's nice is I'm using a very different 5 amp fuse, so that should stand out like a sore thumb. Cover back on, all our wires in, clip, clip, factory as can be. We'll keep this on the outside. I'll put this back up here. Then I can take my fuse panel, snap that back in. We're making some good progress. For the parking brake module, I was just gonna pop this one pin in because it should be similar to how the ECM's already done. I've already showed you guys that, so I didn't want to just repeat the whole thing in a different spot of the car. This module is located just in front of the passenger side taillight. Well, I got the connector out and apart and took this fuse panel right here up and out of the way. And I found something interesting that I've never actually ran into before. Like I had done with other modules, I pulled one of these pins out to confirm that I had the right size pin. If you look real close, you can see there's actually 2 different size holes on this white connector. There's the ones that are just straight up square, and then there's these where these 3 wires are here up in the top that are bigger and have that little extended part up on the top, or in this case, it's gonna be on the bottom. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna pause on this part. I might plug the module back in and just leave all this kind of hanging out here, because I don't want this one pin that's not going to prevent the car to start most likely to slow our progress down. Well, remember a second ago when I said, I'm just going to leave this be and move on to something else? Yeah, I walked away for like 10 seconds and then just couldn't let it go. So I got the connector apart. Check out what I found. So you see these little white nubby things right here? These are actually taking place of pins, because I guess I'm going to have to cut and drill this out. So it's not even like a different pin, it's completely sealed, and it's sealed because if you look way back where in the connector, there's another seal back there. That's why there's just multiple sealed. So I guess our next mission is to drill that out. I'm probably gonna triple check my wiring diagram just to make sure that 26, 25, it's not pin 24 and instead of pin 25, but it calls for pin 25, which is this one right here. So much for leaving things go and moving on. Apparently that's not how I roll. Okay, a 7/64 drill bit and some hand drilling later. It's not the prettiest of things. I had to go over a little bit on hole size. No big deal. Luckily there's no connectors or anything next to it. With any luck, this will slide right into place. Oh yeah. You know you hit victory on one of these when you hear the little click. Okay, awesome. Man, I'm excited about that. Glad we didn't give up. I'm gonna put all this back together. There's no need to watch that, and we'll keep moving on to the next thing. So now we're gonna get our, what I'm calling the flex plate off with this weird clutch setup. Some of these things maybe don't actually exactly function as their traditional name, but I think flex plate's probably the right word for this. So we're gonna take this off, being mindful that there might be stuff like shims and things behind it that we have to deal with. And in order to hold it in place, we're gonna use our bent valve trick. That'll hold our flex plate, and then we're gonna impact these babies out. I'm gonna leave that top one in so that when the flex plate comes off, it doesn't just fall. Okay, not too bad. Not too bad at all. There's no shim or anything on the backside. Now, I wasn't real keen on swapping this starter over, but I checked with our man Pauly D, the parts guy, and it seems like there's a handful of variants and options for starters, and odds are you could probably use the same starter. They don't call it out specifically by auto and manual. They call it out by vendor of the starter. And the last thing I really want is to get it all together and then like the starter fail or bust a hole in the case or some ridiculously outlandish scenario that probably is impossible to happen, but we'd find a way to have happen. I'm gonna undo that with the hopes that the extra space will allow me to push the starter from the front to the back rather than taking the alternator out and taking the engine mount out and all that other stuff. I just need to get enough. Ooh, that could have been it. That could have been the trick, my friends. So here you go. If you need to replace a starter on an Audi, take the transmission out. Oh, there we go. Ugh, maybe. So close. I'm way back here. Well, I'm not sure this was the choice to make, but it's the choice I made. Come on. Yes! Ha ha! How about that? Well, it worked. So here's the starter I just took out for the automatic compared to the one from the car we pulled this manual trans from. As you can see, they are different. To me, it looks like the manual one is a smaller overall starter. It didn't call one for manual, one for DSG. It called for, if it has a Bosch, put a Bosch in it, which is what our DSG had. If it has a Vallejo, put a Vallejo in it, which means it probably could work. But this little bit of struggle is way better than any kind of struggle once the car's all back together. And then we have to chase down why the heck it won't start or some other weird thing that could happen. Now, hopefully, we can just do exactly that same thing going back together with it. Sometimes you gotta talk nice to them. Sometimes you gotta be, you know, a little aggressive with them. This feels like one of those times where talking nice is the right choice. Click, nice, sound of glory. Then we just kinda shove this guy back. Yes! Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Now we got to get the alternator plug back on, and we're in business. Now, because I'm doing a thing you really shouldn't do, and that's reusing the bolts, I'm going to run them through a thread chaser to clean all that old thread locker off. Then we'll put some new thread locker on. Well, here's our two transmissions side by side. The DSG is quite a bit bigger. What the plan now is to get the DSG on a rolly platform like this guy is on, then get this manual on the cart. I can then use the cart to crank the transmission up, put it on the trans jack, and start our process for getting it installed. The prop shafts are also different. You can see the DSG one is quite a bit shorter because the DSG trans, before putting the transmission in, it's probably a good idea to get our flex plate on. The DSG flex plate and the manual flex plate are different. The manual one also looks like it has a pilot bearing inside of it. I didn't account for that, so we're going to be reusing it. What you are looking at here is not best practices. You should do the bearing if it's available separate, and you should do new flex plate bolts. This is one of those things that I hope doesn't come back to bite me. Let's get this guy onto this guy. There we go. Sketchy. We can at least strap it down. Not the sketchiest thing I've ever done. Cranky, cranky. Well, after a whole bunch of jiggling and gurgling and gerbling and whatnot, wiggling and that, our transmission is in. I feel like this is a pretty big victory moment. I'm excited. I'm trying to not get too excited because we still got a long road ahead. Also, this thing is a beast, and I'm pretty sure my back is going to hurt later today. but we'll worry about that later today. Important note here on the transmission bolts, there are a couple of bolts that are different lengths from the manual to the automatic. Mostly the ones at the bottom are going to be longer on the manual. These are also aluminum bolts, so it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and replace them anyway. And if you're getting new bolts, Audi can actually get you the ones for the manual instead of the DSG. I think the next steps are going to be getting the shift linkage on, figuring out where our reverse plug is. There's going to be a ton of stuff that is just me putting things back together. So I hope you enjoy this montage of clips sped up of me putting things back together. Well, we are on our way to getting this thing at least to a state where I can start doing our coating. One thing I want to do before that is get the brake fluid line to the clutch cylinders. I snatched the reservoir off the car we swapped everything off of, but I think I'm just going to try and cut this one first and then plug this line on. It's the same reservoir, just this is not there. Our clutch uses brake fluid to actuate the cylinders, so we're gonna see. We can just cut it. We'll get a little bit of brake fluid leakage for sure. I'm gonna try and not make a huge mess. Oh yeah. There's that. That's a lot of fluid. Oh, it's more than I expected. It's just glurbling out of there. Oh, get in there. Get in there. Okay, somewhat on there. While I'm here, I'm just going to go ahead and bleed the clutch. Probably wouldn't hurt to do a brake fluid service on this thing too. I'm very confident I've never done that. So I got pressure on the reservoir now. We got to find where we're at. Here we go. Ooh, look at that. Sploogey. Let's close it up. That was a big old swath of air that came out. We'll feel the clutch pedal and see how it is, and then determine if we need to re-bleed it. Okay, so I think we got what I need to have connected to the car in order to do the next part, which is coating. And the way I'm gonna do the coating is I'm gonna punch through it, figure it out, and then I'll come back and talk about what all I had to change. Otherwise, you guys are gonna get mega bored. You're gonna click away and go watch pitch meetings or something like that. That's not gonna be good for me, but then I sat down and realized I gotta put some of this stuff back together still before I can do any coating, like the cluster and the start button. So I'm gonna do that now and do the coating, and then we'll talk about what all I had to change. Oh, shush. You just shush. Well, she starts and works. And after a handful of modules that we coated, including the ECM, the gateway, which we told it, hey, you don't have an automatic transmission anymore, the electrics module, the parking brake module, maybe, the convenience module. It really wasn't that bad. Even running the screenshot, it took me about 30 minutes to code the car. And also, big ups to Matt, who's done this swap, for just letting me confirm my coding against his. I have a bunch of warnings in the dash, but I had those before we even started. So we're in pretty good shape. I think now it is time to do our final assembly, but I won't make you watch that because I know you're ready. You want to hear this thing fire up and see it drive it. Next on my pre-test drive punch list, I gotta get the transmission fluid level set. I don't remember if we drained it at Lifetime Audi or not, so I'm gonna check it and top it off as needed. Filling up this manual is very similar to all other VW and Audi manual transmissions. We take the fill plug out, that's where the level is checked, then I'm just gonna pump fluid in until it comes out this hole. After doing a proper test drive and shakedown on the car, I'm gonna come back and service all the fluid. So right now, I'm only worried about the level being correct. Well, next up it is time to get that exhaust back on, and I'm guessing this is going to be hilarious for you guys to watch. We have to get our axles bolted up. I am using a little bit of blue thread locker on these bolts. I think our last piece down here at the bottom is gonna be this guy. Normally the belly pan, that shield, the street shield, or whatever it's called, lives right around here too. Not sure I'm gonna put that on just yet. I wanna make sure I can bring it back in easily and check it for leaks, but you really need to have this bolted up. Apparently it can cause like sagging or some kind of other sad panda thing happening, so I think I need to find those front two bolts. I am still missing that one bolt for the transmission, the center bottom one, so like 6 o'clock position. I got that on order from Audi, but that's not gonna hold us up from shaking this car down on a test drive. I think now it's time. Lower it down a little bit, put the wheels on, clean up top, power steering fluid. Gotta plug the seat in to move the seat. so you can move the seat to bolt the seat in. Now there's still a handful of things under the hood that I'm gonna have to address, like our DSG cabling, and I gotta put all this stuff back together. Okay, I'm at the point where I can wait no longer. I think we're gonna test it up in the air first. Here we go. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Clutch in, start button. Okay, it starts. That's good. Moment of truth. First gear, clutch in, clutch out. Hey! We have 4 wheels rolling. Oh yeah, well, it starts, it moves. I'm feeling real good about that. Let's get it down, get all the crud, lights and everything off, take it on a drive. Whoa. God. I thought it was loud before. Oh yeah. Well, we have shifting. We have acceleration, we have deceleration. Other than being super loud, this is awesome. I mean, clearly it works. I would tell you that I have no warning lights on in the dash. However, that's not the case. We have a billion warning lights on in the dash because this car, as you can tell, is, in fact, race car. Pedal feels good, the clutch feels good, all the shift mechanism stuff feels good. All right, so awesome. Initial shakedown, the car feels great. Let's swing back to the shop and talk about what we still have left to do. Well, we did it. We took our B8 S4 from a DSG to a manual transmission. Let's answer those burning questions that I know you have. First up, how much did all of this cost? From a part standpoint, you can probably expect about $3,500. The transmission alone is gonna run you about $2,500, and then all the extra parts that I went ahead and replaced too. Now, some of the things that I replaced, you don't need to do, such as the steering wheel, which I haven't actually done that yet. Here's a brief rundown of the parts you're definitely going to need. The transmission, the prop shaft, the clutch pedal, the brake pedal, the shifter assembly, a clutch line, the flex plate bolted to the engine. Other than that, you could probably get away with making do with what the car already has. You'll also need some odds and ends bolts, some fluid, some coolant, some power steering fluid if you have the hydro power steering, and of course, your mileage may vary on what else you might need. But I would plan for no less than $3,500 just to do the factory parts. As far as how long this swap actually took, I spent about 5 days on this, but a lot of that time was also spent filming. If you have all the parts and all the tools, you could probably knock it out in a couple of days. Now, that's just the basics. You can spend all the money you want to spend. You can replace a bunch of the parts, you can do the really smart things that I didn't do, which was kind of dumb that I didn't do them. Which brings me to the 3 things that I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have regrets about after doing this job. 1, not doing anything with the timing. It was right there. Really should have done at least the upper stuff, resealed those upper covers, doing the preventative because this thing has 215 something thousand miles on it, and who knows if anything's ever been done to it. Number 2, not doing the clutch. Dumb, dumb, dumb on my part, especially because my S4 is tuned. Doing the clutch while you have the transmission out makes all the sense. Now, it's a little different for me because I can just take the trans out, swap a new clutch in it. It's really not that big of a deal. But if you are paying for this kind of thing, 1, this is really going to be expensive for you because this is going to be a lot of labor. And 2, it overlaps 100%, basically. I think 3 more bolts and I could have had the clutch out. Do a clutch. It's a better choice. And finally, the regret that I think I'm going to have is doing this in the first place. Is having a manual transmission even better in this car? I gotta tell you, I don't know. It's got a fun factor for sure, but is it gonna make the car overall better? Only time will tell. Some of that might depend on how long the clutch lasts or whether the engine blows up or not. There's still a few loose ends in this swap that I need to tie up. I still have to put the belly pan back on. I need to swap the steering wheel, and I need to get fittings to block off those cooler lines. I have them capped off, so it's not gonna leak, but it would be nice to get proper plugs. I'll probably just have those made locally. Another question you probably have is, how hard was this to do? it really wasn't that bad. I would say the hardest thing really is lugging those transmissions in and out of the car. The coding part was not very hard. Working through the wiring diagram to figure out what exactly I needed to add, it wasn't really that bad either. Now, I have some experience doing that, so if wiring is something that you're a little uneasy of, that part can definitely be intimidating. Well, we did what we set out to do. We went from flappy paddles to a shifty boy on a B8 S4, and congratulations! I did nothing unique and basically put together a car that completely already exists. I had a good time. Hope you guys enjoyed following along. With that, I'm out. Have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you again next time. That was all 6 gears, by the way.